Before we get started, I wanted to mention I had created a Facebook group for modelers who use acrylics and those who are interested in learning how to use acrylics. I created this group because I found that anytime I had questions about acrylics, I was not getting responses. Instead, I was being told, oh, you should get rid of them, throw it away, use lacquers, use enamels, whatever. Well, some of us can't do that, and we have to use acrylics. So instead of answering my questions, they would just go on to other things that were not related. And by creating this group, I'm hoping acrylic users can help each other learn how to better our craft and our techniques with acrylics. So I really hope you will consider joining and contributing to the group. I only started this group a few weeks ago, and we're already at 90 plus members. And I hope we will continue to grow and help each other to become better modelers. What you're looking at is a screen capture of my previous video on how to paint scale model cockpits. And I didn't realize when I made this video how popular it was going to be. It was very well received. However, there was some questions about realism versus visual appeal. And I did explain that cockpits with their raised details aren't that realistic. So this way you can try to get some realism if you want, or make it visually appealing. In this video, I'm going to demonstrate both methods to showcase realism as much as possible in a model airplane, and visual appeal using the Spanish style, which uses contrast and makes the cockpit pop out. And you can decide as a modeler, hey, which one do you like and which one do you want to do for your cockpit? There are many ways to paint a cockpit, and this is just my method. And my method of painting a cockpit for realism and visual appeal, I believe you have to have both. I don't think you can have a 100% realistic cockpit. You're never going to take a model and make it 100% realistic. You can simulate certain degree of realism, but it will never be 100% realistic. But at the same time, if you make it too kooky and too visually appealing, it's not going to be, it's not going to be good either. So you have to have a balance here. And if you look at the cockpits that I painted, I go for a balanced approach. However, you can choose how you want to do your cockpit. Some people really try to be as realistic as possible, and some people prefer just to have a visually appealing model, and there's nothing wrong. Build for yourself and your enjoyment. I'm going to start off by priming the cockpit in black, and you don't have to prime your cockpit if you don't want to. However, I recommend priming because it gives the paint something to hold on to. It also highlights any issues you might have that you don't see with the naked eye. So it's always good to prime your models before you paint them, even the cockpit area. All I'm doing is using Badger Stynylreg Reg black and just painting the different components. I've thinned the Badger primer with 30% with my mixture formula. Now I'm going to come in and add in white, and the reason I'm doing this is because black primer covers really well, but black also makes the color darker in tone. So I don't want a darker toned cockpit, and by adding in the white, I'm breaking that up and adding in a little bit of shadows as well. And so I'm just gonna throw in some white. It doesn't have to be pretty, it's not even thin, it's straight from the bottle, just shooting it into the various areas where I want a little bit of highlight to come through. It doesn't have to be pretty because you're going to go over this white with the main color, and it's going to hide a lot of that, but it adds a nice little effect. Again, don't worry about being pretty at this stage. Time to airbrush the main cockpit color, and I'm going to add in this new product, Transpirator from Ammo by MIG, and I keep saying it wrong, whatever it's called, Transportator, whatever. This product, basically what it does is it reduces, it makes the paint translucent a little bit. And what I've done is I've mixed my paint, and then once you've mixed your paint with your thinner, you want to add in 30% transportator to make the paint translucent. And what this does is when you go over your pre-shading, you will not accidentally cover all of it. This is a really nice product if you're new to airbrushing, or maybe you're not comfortable with airbrushing yet and you're worried about covering up all of the pre-work you've done. This will help you out a lot here. And it's really easy to use. Just dump it into your cup and go a couple of layers, see if you like the look, and if you like the look, stop. If you don't, add in more paint. But it will really help not cover up everything that's underneath. So you can see there on the headboard, you can still see the black and the white coming through, and it creates a nice little worn effect that you can use. I'm going to do the same thing to the floorboard and the rest of the pieces, and it will create a nice, somewhat of a used look that I really was going for with this. Now you can see on the top here how it looks afterwards, and you can see the color on the top is the white is kind of shining through and making the color a little bit lighter, versus the bottom side, which didn't have as much white, so it's a little bit darker on the bottom. But it creates a really nice effect, and it makes the color a little bit more natural lighting wise. And so that's why I think this is a nice little product to have in your inventory if you're going to be doing cockpits or other types of painting. Time to do the front cockpit panel, and I've already done a video on this that I would suggest you go watch, but I'm going to talk about why I'm using the particular products I'm using for this. I'm using vallejopaint for this, and the reason for that is it's got a high pigment concentration with low liquid level, and that makes it perfect for dry brushing. You can use paint, but you have to usually knock off a lot of paint, and even then there's a little bit of liquid left that causes the paint to flood a little bit. Because of the high pigment concentration, the paint typically sticks in the raised areas where I'm hitting my brush. And this is why I like doing it this way. It's not realistic because most airplanes, the bezels are not raised, they're recessed. And so this is not a realistic thing, but you want to make this pop and you want to add in things, you're going to tone this down. So this is a nice starting point for all of that. One of the main questions I get is how to paint the various boxes and components inside the cockpit. And my method is, if you go back to my first video, I use a thing called glaze medium to turn the paint into a ink of almost. And this very thin translucent paint, I use that to build up the effect on the component that I'm painting. And why do I do this? It's because this way, if I mess up the painting process, I can come in and fix it easier. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add in layers and just build up that effect until I'm happy. So just keep going, just take the paint and add in until you're happy with the look. And then once the paint dries, you'll get a nice feel for how it's going, and you can decide, hey, am I happy with this or am I not happy with this? And it's very simple to do. It's not a complicated process. Just use a little bit of hand control, eye coordination, and just build up your paint nice and easily. Another thing I want to point out here is how to create the separation line on the boxes between the paint and the wall. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go nice and gentle, and every pass I'm getting closer and closer to that demarcation between the box and the wall. And the paint, because it's very thin, it's going to help with that demarcation build up. I'm doing the same thing with the rest of the buttons and different components of the cockpit that need to be painted. Same process. I'm going to go in nice and gentle, bring it to the wall, let the paint do its thing, come back in and keep going until I'm happy with how the color is looking. And if I mess up, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to come back in, with paint thinned with the glaze medium, create a nice little ink, and go in, because if I go in with just the paint by itself, it's going to be too harsh and it's not going to flow as well. But by creating into an ink using the glaze medium, I'm able to control it and fix the errors easier, and I'm going to demonstrate that later on in this video, by the way. So as you can see, it's coming along very nicely. We still have a lot more stuff to do to this, but you can see that it's getting there. Again, same with all of these other components. Just use a little bit of paint with the glaze medium, turn it into an ink, and just kind of let it do its thing. Get close, let the paint capillary action create that border separation for you. And again, I'm not happy with that. I can come in and darken the color if I want to. Time to paint the headrest here, and I'm going to do the same thing. Nice and gentle strokes. Mixed my paint with water in this case, because I'm going to use the glaze medium a little bit later, and just nice strokes up and down, and the paint will self-level out and leave a nice finish afterwards. And the reason I'm using water is water helps the paint flow over pieces like this, but don't use too much water. So I'm using about maybe 15% water, my brush dipped in water, and then I mix it with the paint a little bit and go in. And creating the border right there between the leather headset, I'm just going to touch the paint on the side and let the capillary action do its job. And now I have a nice separated out headrest from the wall. Same on this side, just going to let the brush touch, let the capillary action do its job. And again, here on the top, same thing. So I'm using a leather brown color here, and I'm going to come in and change and weather that headrest based on photos I saw. So the first thing I'm going to do is I lighten the main color, and I'm going to gently create a little bit of wear and tear on the edges, as I've seen on photos. So a lot of the pictures that I saw of the headrest, they seem to wear around the edges, and a lightish brownish type of color, discoloration almost. And I'm kind of wondering if they were leather or some sort of fake leather or something. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to weather the inside area of the headrest by using a little bit of a mixed color. You go with whatever you desire, and a little bit of glaze medium. So remember, it makes the paint into an ink. And really what I'm doing is I'm just adding like an ink on top of the paint, so it's discoloring it a little bit, and then when it dries, it's going to leave a worn effect on it. It's a really nice little trick for weathering that I picked up from the Gunpla community. There we go. You can see the headrest looks worn and used. And now I'm going to come in and I'm going to highlight the edges to give the cockpit a little bit of depth. And all I've done is taken the main color and just thinned it a little bit with white. There's no formula, it's whatever you're happy with. And I'm just going to go around the edges, give it a little bit of depth. I'm also going to use the same color to create fading and a little bit of chipping. I'm also going to highlight the main raised edges just to make them pop a little bit. And again, a lot of this is going to be toned down when we add in our flat. So using the same color, I'm creating some chipping here, or paint fading, focused on the areas that I saw in photos. And you can wipe away some of it with your finger, so that's also a good thing if you screw up a little bit, like I did there. And I'm going to keep going until I'm happy. Same with the seat. I'm going to go in and highlight the edges of the seat. And this little bit of the sides. And do some paint fading at the top, because this is where I saw a lot of the majority of the paint fading on the seat, because I think the pilot's probably grabbing onto the seat all the time when he has to get in and get out, and then some chipping back and forth when his back is touching. So this is kind of what I've done. It looks a little exaggerated, but again, it's going to tone down. Same thing with the floorboard. I'm going to hit the raised areas just to make them pop a little bit. And then I'm going to hit some of the other areas just to bring out a little bit here and there. Nothing too extreme. It looks bad now, I know. But again, it is going to tone down quite a lot. The flat really brings things together. So don't be afraid of this step. You have to kind of figure out what's too much and what isn't. And sometimes when it looks too much, it actually isn't. And then when it's too much, it's not enough. And it's kind of a weird thing you get a feel for. But as you can see, I'm really hitting those raised edges of the floor panel there and bringing out as much as I can right now. And this is just a guess, by the way. I actually couldn't see a lot of floor panel pictures, so I'm just guessing this is some of the areas where the pilot's feet are touching constantly and he's jumping back and forth, that we're getting some paint chipping and paint discoloration. And I'm again doing the same thing on the edges just to make them pop a little bit and give everything a little bit more depth, and just add in some wear and tear. This would be behind the cockpit panel itself, so you wouldn't even see this, but we know it's there. So that's something you can add in for yourself if you like. You actually don't have to worry about this panel, in my opinion. Now that the chipping is done, it's time to paint the dials on the sidewalls and the other remaining areas. Again, I'm using the same process with the main cockpit panel, and I'm going in exaggerated because I want to show how you can fix a mistake. I'm using ammo dial paint here, and I'm coming in really heavy. I didn't knock off majority of the paint, and I'm trying to get it into all of these nooks and crannies to show you can recover from mistakes like this if you just follow a simple procedure here. So as you can see, the entire area is covered in paint, and in particular some parts of that panel I don't want in paint. I'm going to do the same thing on this panel to showcase. I would not use this much paint. I would knock back a little bit, but again, I'm trying to show you how to fix this. So I'm going to use thinned paint, and I'm going to let the paint flow in, and I'm using the glaze medium to thin my paint here, and coming in and just using a little bit of capillary action to cover the mistakes. And it won't fully cover the mistakes, but it'll create a tint over them, which makes it look a little bit used, which creates a really nice effect while you're fixing your mistake. So you're fixing your mistake, but also making it look used a little bit. I'm just going to touch it on the areas where there's a little bit too much paint, where I went a little bit too heavy-handed right there. So you can see as it's drying, it's already creating a nice effect. Same with this area where I went in a little bit too heavy. I'm just going to use a little bit of capillary action, let the paint do its job, clean up those mistakes. If you want to really reduce or get rid of the mistake completely, don't use glaze medium. Use the paint, and then with a little bit of water, and let that come in and cover up everything. That's going to cover up a lot more than the glaze medium. The glaze medium is not going to cover as much. Time to paint the cockpit. This is a Vallejo red. It's not thin, straight on the brush, just wiped a little bit, and I'm going to touch the tip of the brush to the raised edges, and the paint will stick. So don't be afraid to paint dials. You just need to touch a little bit and the paint will stick. acrylic paints are really great for brush painting, and so you can see here, they're very friendly for brush painting purposes. So just going to tap a little bit on each of the dials that I want to color, and there it is, simple as that. Same with this, just going to touch that middle button right there, let the paint do its work. Here's the final result from all that work we did. Now, I want to mention something, as I said earlier in the video. The first painting process is going to show the realistic, quote-unquote, way of painting a cockpit. And this is what I grew up on. Back in 1991, this is what we used to do, and this is how we paint cockpits, and I've been painting cockpits. So, I like this style. Yes, I think it's more realistic because it's not exaggerating everything. I think the results are nice. There's nothing wrong with it. And you can still do more stuff here. You can add in a wash. You can add in other pigments if you like. But it's not really going to change more than this. And if you like this, awesome, do it. But I want to show you the second school of painting cockpits coming from the Spanish style, which is far more exaggerated, and it's not as realistic, I freely admit that, but it's eye-catching. And so let's go on to the second part now. In this chapter, I'm going to discuss zenithal lighting, or as it's also commonly called, zenith lighting. Zenithal lighting is a common practice in the armor modeling community and in the figure modeling community, not so much in the airplane modeling community. I decided to do zenithal lighting in the cockpit because it produces a eye-catching result. It is not realistic, but I wasn't really going for ultra realism with this kit build. I wanted to have fun with it and make it more eye-catching and appealing, especially as I'm going to cover the cockpit by having the canopy closed. I was able to find this wonderful illustration that talks about zenithal lighting positives. It only has one light source, it's realistic, and produces the least amount of contrast. And that's true for armor modelers. However, in this demonstration, I am going to create a very vivid contrast while still using only one light source. In an airplane, the one light source will be coming top down, and that is from the sun down into the cockpit. I'm going to demonstrate how I create zenithal highlights, and this is a little bit different than what is done in the Spanish school of modeling, because the transition between the paints from the zenithal highlights to the non-highlights is a little bit more drastic. I prefer a smooth transition. And so what I'm doing is I am creating a highlight. I'm starting from the top because that's where the light source is going to hit first. And as I get towards the middle, I'm using less and less paint. And as I get towards the bottom, I'm actually not airbrushing at the bottom. I'm shooting short bursts of paint. And this is going to help me create a smoother transition from the highlights from the top to the bottom. So you can see it's starting to happen where the top, you can see the paint is becoming a brighter greenish color. And then as I get towards the bottom, I'm only shooting short bursts, and it's creating a smoother transition versus a very harsh transition in the Spanish school of modeling. And I like the smoother transition better, so that's why I prefer to go this way. But each successive layer, I'm highlighting the paint a little bit more. Then I'm going in, airbrushing the top, going into the middle, starting to use less and less paint, and towards the bottom, just shooting short bursts of paint. And you can see the contrast occurring, the zenith highlights occurring, and the contrast between the top and the bottom. And I'm going to do this until I'm happy. There's no set formula. It's really what looks good to you, and I'm going to keep going until I think it looks really nice and I'm happy with it. And it doesn't stop here, because I've created the Zenithal highlights, but then I'm going to create contrast, not using the airbrush, but using other things, pigments, oil paints, because you do want that contrast where the sunlight isn't touching to make it a little bit more eye-catching. Each successive layer adds in a little bit more. So you can see how the paint went from a dark green to this yellowish green at the top, and there's a very smooth transition. And if you turn it around and look from the top down, this is what the sunlight effect would be. And it just creates a beautiful effect, in my opinion, that just makes it eye-catching. Now that I've shown how to do zenith lighting for the sidewalls of the cockpit, we need to talk about zenith lighting for the floor of the cockpit. Because the floor of the cockpit is directly underneath, the light source is going to be top down, but the light is going to spread out to different directions. It's not going to go top down, it's going to go in all directions. So you want to focus your zenith lighting in the middle, and you want to airbrush in the middle and spread out from the middle to the sides. And in a cockpit, what you're looking for is like the open areas of the cockpit, and to focus your painting in that. So in this display piece, I'm just going to start from the middle and start going out. I'm going to airbrush the middle, but I'm going to shoot bursts of paint as I get further away from the middle towards the outer edges. And so it's going to create the same type of effect as on the sidewalls, where the middle is going to be bright and the sides are not going to be as bright, but the transition is going to be smooth. Now, another thing to note here is I do the floor as soon as I'm done with my last shading of the sidewall, because I'm not going to add in highlights. I am going to use whatever the highest highlighted paint I had remaining in my cup to do the zenith lighting for the floor, because there's no point in adding in different layers. So this is why it's a little bit different than the sidewall. So you can see here, it creates a nice effect. I have this zenith lighting going out with a smooth transition towards the sides. Now that we have added our zenith highlights, I went ahead and I sprayed a coat of Alclad Aqua Gloss onto the pieces, and I'm going in with a complementary color to continue the vividness at the top area of the cockpit. So most of the time people will use a dark brown wash with a green cockpit, which does look very nice. However, because I want to continue this vividness, I'm going to use a complementary color, and I'm using Vallejo's olive green wash. And all I'm doing is dipping my brush into the wash, using capillary action, and letting the wash flow into areas. A acrylic wash is almost like oil paint. You have to build up the effect. It's really subtle effects. It is not as stark as, for example, an enamel wash. So keep that in mind. So you have to do a couple of coats here and there. But the complementary color is going to make the green pop out a little bit more and the areas pop out a little bit more. But it won't be as contrasting as, for example, the brown wash, which we're going to save for the bottom side of the cockpit floor here. So I'm going to use the wash around all of the areas at the top, the headrest, the seat support, etc., all of those areas. Just let the wash flow. And I found that Aqua Gloss really is the best thing to use with Vallejo washes, because once dry, Vallejo washes are the hardest thing on the planet to get off. But with Aqua Gloss, I can still come in and wipe them away if I need to. So that's why I'm using Aqua Gloss here. Okay, now we're going to focus on the bottom area. And I've added in my zenith highlights down there, as you can see. And I'm going to come in, and now this is where the contrast is going to occur heavily. And what I'm doing here is I'm using a dark brown wash because I really want to highlight this area and make it look different from the top side where the sunlight is coming in. This is going to be darker, hidden area where the sunlight, yes, it's going to hit, but it's going to also have a lot of shadows and such. And this is why I'm using the dark brown. And this contrast is going to create a really amazing effect in the cockpit. And the Spanish school of modeling, really, that's kind of one of the main things is they use a lot of contrast to create vividness in their work. And it makes it outstanding looking that way. So here on the cockpit, I'm going to keep adding in the dark brown wash until I'm happy. But I'm also going to add in some other stuff like oil paint, just to give it a nice effect and make it look a little bit darker inside. The result, again, is not realistic, and I fully admit that. But it's very eye-catching, and it's very just artistic and looks really cool, in my opinion. But again, not realistic. Okay, for the side panels, I'm going to use oil paint. And the reason I'm using oil paint is because I want to create a grime looking effect towards the bottom. And oil paints are really, really great for this purpose. And in some of the recessed areas or the hidden look areas, I'm also going to use a little bit of oil paint as well, just to create a little bit of grime in those locations and like areas where the pilot is going to be touching along, like the foot areas right there. I'm going to add in a lot of oil paints just to create that grime effect. And I'm just using a dark brownish color. I don't even know what the color is. And I let the oil paint dry, and then I'm going to come in with a dry brush, and I'm just going to dab away and blend in everything. And just keep going. The more you go, the more blended it will be, and eventually you'll remove majority of it. So, you know, go until you're happy. So I'm happy right there. It looks like it's a grimy sidewall right there. Same with the cockpit floor. I'm going to keep dabbing in my airbrush. My paintbrush until I'm happy with the result in the blending in of the oil paint. Same with this little crevice area here with the front panel. I'm going to blend in the oil paints until I'm happy, and it will just look like this dirty grime area has built up. The last thing I'm going to do is add in some pigment, and that's just to make it a little more dirty right in those areas where the pilot is going to be stepping. You know, these airplanes were a lot of time in the field and not on runways, so you're going to get a little bit of mud and stuff. And again, it's over exaggerated and such, but it just makes the model look a little bit more lively this way. So it really doesn't matter. Again, we're not going for realism; we're going for visual appeal here more than anything else. And so what you're going to do is you're going to add in the pigments, but you can knock back a lot of the pigments using a brush.